Time to write your own program. So what you want to keep in mind is a computer can really only do three things. It can move and store information, do some basic math, repeat a series of steps. And you might disagree with me. You might say, wait a minute, I do a lot more than that on my computer. But the truth of the matter is, everything the computer does can be broken down into one of these three steps. So if computers can do such amazing things, that means programmers have to be incredibly smart. So you, the programmer, need to break down a problem into either moving and storing information, performing basic math, or repeating a series of steps. After you've done that, we can then write a program to solve a problem. So what we're going to learn today is how to do the first two. How do we move and store information? How do we perform basic math? So let's start with displaying information. This was the code you typed in for assignment 1A, and this is what it did. How did we get this to appear on the screen? We used the code print, and then there was a bracket, a quotation mark. Everything that was inside the quotation mark appears exactly as you typed it in. It said hello, the word hello appears. This is known as a variable. The variable can store all sorts of different information. Whatever you type in as your name is going to appear here. So the basic format of a print statement, print, bracket, quotation, whatever message you want to appear on the screen, quotation, comma, and any variable. To end the print statement, end your bracket. Now the print statement is incredibly versatile. You can have as many messages and as many variables as you want. When you finish one, you close the quotation to say, I'm finished with that message. Here's my variable. Put as many variables as you want, whether they are interspersed with messages or not. Lots of possible variations. Let's look at a more complicated example. I'm calling course 1 computer science, course 2 math, and for the name, you. What will happen when we say print hello name? Your first period class is course 1, and your second period class is course 2. The computer takes the word hello and puts it on the screen. It looks for the name, which was you. So now it says hello you. Your first period class is, so that appears exactly as typed out. Your first period class is. And there's another variable, course 1, which is computer science. So computer science now appears. Then what happens? And your second period class is, that's a message. It appears exactly as you typed it in. And then we have another variable, course 2. And what was the value of course 2? Math. So math appears. So lots of possible variations with print, open bracket, quotation, any message. When you're done with your message, close your quotation, comma, as many variables as you want, and when you're finished, close your bracket. There's another variation on a print statement. If you have a long message, and for some reason this keeps messing up, you can say print, open your bracket as you normally do, and then 1, 2, 3 quotation marks. This says get ready for a big message. Put as many lines of code in here as you want. Your message can be as big as you want, and then 1, 2, 3 quotation marks to match the beginning, close your bracket. Useful for things like basic graphics. So we'll do print, 1, 2, 3, put in anything you want, 1, 2, 3, and we'll get the picture back again. So it's useful for basic graphics, title pages, and big long explanations. Saves you from having to write print. Okay, so again, a print statement, print, open bracket, quotation, message. End your message with a quotation, comma, any variables or other messages you want, end with a closing bracket. If it's a big long message, 1, 2, 3 quotations, match it with 1, 2, 3 quotations. Now, what else can we do with moving and storing information? We can ask the user for some information. So let's go back to that example. how did we do this? How did we ask the user to type in a name? So this one is input. Input is asking the user to do something. Bracket, quotation, message, quotation. Looks a lot like print, except there's no variable. Close the bracket and the variable goes on this side. So it's asking the user for some information, tells them exactly what information they want, and the answer gets stored in name. Now, the variable equals input bracket quotation message quotation bracket. The input statement is not versatile. Your input statement is going to look like this. You have a variable, it equals whatever the input, give the user a message so they know what to do. Now, this sort of input always gives us a string, meaning letters. So what do we do if we want to input numbers? We have to tell the computer that we really want this to be a number rather than a collection of letters. So let's take an example. We could ask the user for two numbers. So here's our input, bracket, quotation. Tell the user what you want. Type in your first number, quotation, close bracket. Then we put that int around it, int, open bracket, close bracket, and that will make the number you type in a number rather than a collection of letters. So here it is again to get a second number. There's our input, bracket, quotation, message, quotation, close bracket, and the extra bracket we're getting here matches the one because we're using the int to make it an integer. How does it work? It'll give us the message, type in the first number, that appears exactly as we did. It'll wait for the user to do something, and the user types in 5. That will get stored as num1. So that says num1. Then type in the second number. That'll appear exactly as you wrote it in the quotation marks. That gets stored in num2. So 7 is num2. And then our print statement coming up, your numbers are num1, 5, and num2, 7. So now you know how to get information on the screen and information from the user. Now, big warning. A lot of errors come in here, and the error is, let's see if you can spot it. What you'll get a warning is that there's an invalid syntax. There'll be a red warning at the start of the line, and you'll look very carefully at this line, and there is nothing wrong with it. And it's really frustrating because you look and look and look and look and look and look and look, and there is nothing wrong with that line. So when you see the error highlighted at the start of the line, the error is often at the end of the previous line. Can you see what's missing? The most common error that's ever going to happen. We have 1 starting bracket, 2 starting brackets, should be matched with 1 closing bracket and 2 closing brackets. So if you ever get this message of invalid syntax, highlights the start of the line, check the end of the line before, and you'll probably find the mistake. All right, now what are these variables that we keep talking about? All a variable is it's something that's used to store information. They can be letters, which are known as strings, numbers without a decimal, known as integers, that's the one we just looked at for the int, and numbers with decimals, known as floating point. And really what I'd like you to think of, when you go to the post office, you see a series of mailboxes. The computer has a collection of memory, and it works like a series of mailboxes. When we use num1, the computer puts a label on the mailbox and calls that num1. When you do an input and a number goes into num1, it stores it there. You have another input, call it num2. Whatever you type in for num2 gets stored in that memory location. And then when it says print the value of num1, it just takes what was in num1 and puts it on your screen instead. All right, time for some basic math. A computer can add. It can take num1 and num2 and add them. We always need somewhere to store it, and the storage goes on the left-hand side. Use a name that gives you an idea of what's going on. So what would happen now is sum would have a space in memory, and sum would equal the value of what's in num1 plus num2, so it would take 5 and 7, and so 12 would be in sum. When you subtract, you use the minus sign. We're subtracting num1 and num2 and putting that in difference, so there'd be a variable here called difference, and it would be num1 minus num2, so we'd take the value of num1, subtract num2, and -2 would appear in difference. Multiply is the asterisk. Num1 times num2 gets stored in product. That'd be a variable here called product. And I'm not typing the whole thing out because it just takes so long, but that would be 5 times 7, so 35 would be in product. Quotient, you take num1 and divide by num2. So 5 divided by 7, 0 point something. So there'd be a decimal in that one. When you do a power, it's asterisk, asterisk. So if we took num1 and raised it to the power 3, that would be 5 times 5 times 5. So cube would equal 125. So anytime you're doing an exponent, it's asterisk, asterisk. You can also do special functions like square roots. So if we wanted the square root of 5, for example, that would go into root. Now, if you would like a more intense math function, trigonometry, for example, there are more, and you can find them on page 10 and page 11 of the book. Now, a bit of a warning. Other programmers have written some code that we are allowed to import into our program and use. So if you use these other math functions, you have to import math. How does that look? First line of code says import math. And then if I want to use the square root function, I don't have to write it. It just comes for free. So if you're using the more intense math functions, as in something other than add, subtract, multiply, divide, and exponents, you have to import math first before you use it. Let's just see how this works. We type in a number, it finds the square root and prints the square root. So if I type in 64, 64 would go into num1. We take the square root of 64, and that would go into answer, and it would print the square root of 64 is 8. So when you write a program, here's what you do. You break your code into steps, and then you translate each step into the language you're using. Now, it's useful to write the steps out first. These things in red are known as comments, and anything after the number sign the computer ignores. The human being likes it, the computer couldn't care less. So here's our first program. Let's input 2 numbers and then calculate the sum and the product. So what do you need first? We need 2 numbers, so let's get 2 numbers. So we're just thinking in English in terms of basic steps. We have to find the sum, so we'll add the numbers. We have to find the product, we'll multiply the numbers. And then we want to see the answer, so we'll display the answer. Now, what does that look like in computer science? We are getting 2 numbers from the user. The key word would be input. We know we have input, bracket, quotation, a useful message, close your quotation and your bracket. Then because it's a number, we need to put int bracket around that. And now we have to store it somewhere useful. Please use intelligent variable names. And then when you look at your own code, it'll make more sense. And we need 2 of these, so we'll do it again. Same code, slightly different variable name, and good instructions. How do we add the numbers? We're going to use a plus sign. We're adding num1 and num2, and we need to store it somewhere. And we store it in something that makes sense. The addition of numbers is known as a sum, so we'll call it sum. Multiply numbers, that was the asterisk. It's going to look a lot like this line, but instead of plus, we would multiply. And what's a good name for what you call the multiplication of 2 numbers? How about product? So num1 times num2. Time to display the answers. What was the line of code? Getting information from the user was input to put it on the screen. Print. quotation, give us some information. The sum is, or you could say print sum equals. So something that tells us what's happening. So whether you like symbols or words, give us some information. And then what is this? This is where the answer is stored. How do we know it? Because that's what we called it. So can you figure out how to display the product? Print, bracket, quotation, useful message, quotation, comma, and what variable? Be product this time. So your job now, you're going to do assignment 2A. 2A says input two numbers, determine the sum, the product, the difference, and the quotient. So you have to get two numbers, so you get to use that code. You have to find the sum of the product. Then you're going to write some code to find the difference and the quotient. So look at this, see what we did, and see if you can put in the missing information. We need to print the sum, we need to print the product, we'll have to print the difference, we'll have to print the quotient. So use this as the basis for 2A, modify it slightly, and you'll get that finished. When you're done, you're on to 2B, and you really have to think on that one. After 2A and 2B, 2C and 2D, and again, it's just a matter of can you work out the basic steps and the basic math to solve the problem. All right, have fun.